Russia's Wagner mercenaries in Belarus are returning to Russia just weeks after arriving. That's according to the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War. A report from that organization suggests that Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has refused to finance the Russian private army, which has been allowed to operate in Belarus following its short-lived uprising against the Kremlin in June.
Wagner Group mercenaries training Belarusian military personnel just last month. Belarus's Ministry of Defense released the footage which claims to show the group who were allowed to set up camp in the country by leader Alexander Lukashenko. That came as a result of a deal he brokered in June that put an end to a revolt against his close ally Russian President Vladimir Putin by Wagner mercenaries. It was launched by their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Lukashenko has appeared to welcome Wagner mercenaries being in his country. Wagner are helping us for free, even though they're mercenaries who fought and worked everywhere for money. To be honest, I want to keep them as a unit here. They're real fighters who've been through a war. The Wagner mercenaries appeared to be setting up a base in Belarus. These satellite images from June purportedly show a military facility under construction, not far from the capital Minsk. But now, just weeks later, there are unconfirmed reports that a majority of the mercenaries have been kicked out of Belarus by the country's leader, Alexander Lukashenko.
And joining me now to look at this story in some depth is Walter Feistinger. He is a former Brigadier General of Austria's armed forces. He's now the president of the Center for Strategic Analysis, a Vienna-based think tank, joining us from Austria. And thank you for joining us on DW. When it comes to Wagner, it's always a bit confusing exactly about their whereabouts. What more can you tell us?
That is the big question mark. How strong is the Wagner Group today and where are they located? Because we hear several messages. The first one is that some of the Wagner fighters joined the Russian regular army. Some of them went to Belarus. Some of them had holidays, as Mr. Prigozhin told it. And some of them are engaged in Africa and other places, as we know. So the real figures, the real location now is totally unclear. And unclear is also the aim of Mr. Prigozhin, what he wants to do in the next few weeks.
Yes, even mercenaries, I guess, deserve some vacation now and then. Belarus, Russia, why does it matter? Why should we care where this mercenary group is actually based?
It is very important because nobody knows what will be the next goal of the Wagner Group, where will be engaged. So it was very clear from the first moment at the end of June that they will not stay very long in Belarus because it was only an interim period. That was clear from the very beginning because they do not have a real task there. To train the Belarusian army is not a real time-consuming and long-lasting task for them. So it was clear that it was only an interim step waiting for the next. And the next, what could it be? Could it be another engagement in Ukraine? Could it be a stronger engagement in Syria, in Africa, in African states, and so on? Or could it be a dissolution of the group that is not in the interest of Prigozhin, but maybe in the interest of Putin?
Right. You bring up a lot of questions there, and there's more questions. Just the recent timeline, of course, Wagner was for a long time closely associated with Putin, helped, see his interests through around the world. Then came the rebellion in June. That was very short-lived. What would you say now is the relationship between the group and Russia's various security interests around the world?
There are some indications that there are strong ties with the Russian regular forces still from Mr. Prigozhin himself and his groups, and that there are strong ties also with very important, I would say, political figures in Russia. How the quality of relationship with Putin is, that is unclear for me, because Prigozhin is a big political danger for Mr. Putin, I would say. So it cannot be in the interest of Mr. Putin to give him a strong role in the future. And that is one of the key points in the future, because the Wagner Group itself can be very useful for Mr. Putin, President Putin, and Russia. But Mr. Prigozhin still is a threat to him and his political role. So I could expect that there will be a division between Mr. Prigozhin himself as a person, as a leader, and the Wagner Group as an instrument.
Well, when it comes to Wagner, always more questions than answers, but Walter Feichtinger there bringing us some of the latest insights from the Center for Strategic Analysis in Austria. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by Katarina Stepanenko, Russia analyst at the Institute for the Study of War. She joins us now from Washington, D.C. It's good to have you with us. It was your organization which reported the latest on the potential movements of these Wagner fighters. We know it's very, very difficult to verify reports like this. Tell us, how do you know this, and what more can you tell us?
Yes, of course. The information that we've observed came from Kremlin insider sources. So obviously we cannot verify their full legitimacy. However, these sources in the past have been credible when reporting on situation with Russian security forces. It is, like I've said, the evidence is the insider sources stated that around 400 to 500 Wagner personnel is moving to Krasnodar Krai, so it's not the entirety of the constituency in Belarus. I also want to preface that the recently obtained satellite imagery shows that there's an increase in military equipment in the Tsel Osipovich base in Belarus, which might suggest that Wagner is still continuing their operations in Belarus at this time and might have even increased their presence.
So what about the report that the Belarusian leader, Alexander Lukashenko, saying that he doesn't want to finance the Wagner group? Are we seeing there a rift opening up between him and Russian President Vladimir Putin?
That was also a claim by one of the Kremlin insider sources who has been connected to Russian security forces. It's interesting to the extent of which Lukashenko has been integrated into kind of solving the Kremlin's issues on the ground. And so Lukashenko's presence in this deal, was an inherent slap to Putin when it was first brokered. The dissolution of this negotiation, if that actually happens, might have some implications on just Putin's ability to assert power and decisively solve issues that happen internally within Russia.
Yeah. So if Wagner in Russia, Wagner in Belarus, why does it matter, or why is it so important to know where Wagner mercenaries are stationed and located?
Because it's a demonstration of Putin's ability to resolve issues that arise for his regime. Obviously, having 13,000 militants that have previously staged an armed rebellion in Russia or in Belarus poses some sort of a threat for Putin's regime. So the whereabouts of this group of forces that is reportedly being deprived of some of the opportunities in Africa and the Middle East and being upset with, for example, the Kremlin could be a bad sign for Putin. I think what we're observing now is Putin continues his efforts to prioritize the destruction of Prigozhin as an individual, as a figure within Russia, more so than actually figuring out what Wagner personnel is going to do next.
Since Wagner's short-lived rebellion in June, allegedly against the leadership of the Russian military, what can we say the relationship is between Wagner and Russia's various security interests around the world? There were reports in the past week or so that there may be Wagner forces in Niger, which just experienced another coup.
I think that there's two currents that are ongoing. The first current is Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who has reportedly been trying to limit Wagner's operations abroad. Essentially, his goal, it seems to be, to replace Wagner personnel operating in Africa and the Middle East with other personnel from other private military companies affiliated with the Russian Ministry of Defense. So right now, it's really unclear, and it looks like the Kremlin doesn't have a set goal and a set strategy for integrating Wagner personnel, both in their domestic operations as well as international operations, and furthermore in Ukraine.
Katarina Stepanenko, we appreciate your time and your insight tonight. Thank you.